Hi, folks. Welcome back to another bonus episode of Science Fiction Book Club. My name is Abu, as always.
It's me, Opsa.
I'm here with Obsa. We are here to finish our journey with Severance.
Yes, we are, Abu.
I'm excited. Severance Season 2 in particular. So we already, Obsa, talked about Severance Season 2, Episodes 1 through 5, the first half of the season.
That's right.
There's a bonus episode for that back in the feed. Check it out if you haven't already, folks. Today, we're going to be focusing on the rest of the season, 6 through 10, primarily. But, in general, talking about the season at large.
Yeah.
Obviously, before we get into it, spoiler warning, make sure you have watched Severance Season 1 and Season 2.
Yes.
That is a bit of a requirement. It's an excellent show.
Yeah.
We highly, highly recommend it. So go check that out, watch the show first, and then come back and listen to our conversation and be a part of our convo.
Please do.
Okay. So there's a lot, truly a lot of ground to cover.
Yeah, indeed.
But just to get it out of the way, I think our feelings about the show are pretty obvious. But what did you think of Season 2?
I think I speak for both of us, to be clear.
I think so.
We loved it.
Oh, my goodness. Yes.
Yeah, I called it in, our mid-season commentary, but masterwork in the making, masterpiece in the finale. I think we ended with quite a banger. We'll talk about that last episode, but honestly, nearly every episode of the back half here slapped, as the kids say.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You have spoken for me.
Yeah.
That's exactly how I feel. I truly think this is one of the best TV shows I've watched in years.
Yes.
I think Ben Stiller and the team have created something incredibly special. Obviously, it's been a huge hit for Apple.
Oh, their number one show of all time.
Show.
Yes.
Severance Season 2, I think, knocks it out of the park.
Indeed.
I'm very excited to drill down into some of the details here, but I agree. I think every single episode, even episode 8, folks, I know there were some folks out there who did not like the Cobell bottle episode where she went back to her hometown. I even enjoyed that for its reveals. I understand the criticisms, but I simply was totally drawn in by every single episode.
Yeah, I agree.
Leading up to that incredible finale.
Yeah. I will say even about that episode, the chance to just see, again, life outside of Lumen itself is always wonderful. And getting a little bit more backstory on Lumen's past, the relationship between Cobell and the factory she worked in as a child, the ether. There's a lot that happens that, yes, some critiques that perhaps we can share, but altogether, it's hard to criticize a show that's as meticulous in its storytelling, its cinematography. It's just
the acting.
The acting obviously is superb. The set design, the costumes, everything honestly is standout.
Totally.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk. We're going to be talking about Lumen a lot this episode. Yeah. Obviously, there were a number of Lumen reveals in the back half of this season in episode 6 to 10. But let's start with Irving.
Let's start with Irving.
Our guy Irving.
Yes.
He has such a fascinating arc in the latter half of this season.
Yes.
We see that he is, after the whole Heli situation at the Ortbo, he is obviously let go from Lumen.
Yep.
He's been tracking what Lumen has been up to, clearly.
Yes. Yeah.
And we see over the course of the latter half of the season how he gets to know Bert outside of Lumen.
Bert and Fields,
His
husband.
He's invited to a dinner party at their home.
Yeah.
We learn a couple of key details about Lumen and how long the severance procedure has been around, how long Lumen has been around.
Right.
What did you think of Irving and his arc in the story? Obviously, it ends on a somewhat hopeful note in an otherwise very dreary show.
Yeah, true. Well, I will say I rather enjoy not just Irving, played by obviously the incredible John Turturro.
So good.
And opposite, I think Christopher Walken in one of his best performances to memory. I think the weird dynamic between him, them having dinner with Fields, Bert, Christopher Walken's character's husband, is so interesting. And even his nickname, that's Bert's nickname, Attila, as a reference to Attila the Hun, coming from the affectionate Honey as his nickname, was interesting because we learned that Bert was essentially an enforcer for Lumen, and there's something that he's seeking, which is a sort of redemption. Like why he becomes split or severed is to find some sort of redemption for his inner self, his innie. Like as he learned at church, I think it might be possible for innies to go to heaven even if one's outie doesn't. So lots of really fascinating questions raised just there. And I think opposite him, obviously, Irving does a phenomenal job continuing the suspense and the mystery of just trying to dig into what do we know about Lumen? What is the kind of underlying conspiracy here? He is somewhat in the dark as we are as well, and kind of serves as a proxy for us, but is piecing together a little bit, bit by bit. And I just thought, fantastic character.
Absolutely. And, I'm not so certain that this is the end of Irving.
Yeah.
Did he get on that train and go away forever and we'll never see him in the show again?
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I know that his interactions with Bert had deeply affected him, obviously.
Right.
But is he going to give up on the Lumen conspiracy that easily?
Hard to say that he would do that. I don't know that doesn't feel like the Irving I've gotten to know. Yeah.
And to be fair, I've watched enough TV to know that if we didn't see him get on the train and see the train get to its destination and see him settle down in retirement, he could always come back.
That's right. That's right. True.
We did not for sure see Irv do exactly that. I think they're leaving the door open for Irving to come back and continue whatever his crusade is against Lumen. Because I think we're not entirely even clear yet on Irving's entire backstory.
Right.
Why was he employed at Lumen in the first place? Why is he keeping records of Lumen?
Yeah.
He has paintings of the dark hallway in his home.
And how does he have those images in his head?
How does he have those? Yeah. Right. And I think there's a lot of questions still remaining about Irving. And I don't think the show would leave it at him just walking off into the sunset, getting on a train and leaving.
Right. It is, I mean, definitely painful to see him and Bert unable to essentially live out the love that they had found on the inside. And we can see that outie Irving does want to. He's, I mean, and I don't know if that's a commentary on whether love transcends the severance process, if that's the question. Maybe kind of what they're hinting at there, because otherwise there's really no reason for Irving and Bert to have any special attachment to one another.
No.
So there are some questions raised about the kind of totality of Severance and what seems to transcend or possibly kind of violate the procedure a little bit.
Right. I mean, there's that scene earlier in the season where that like big enforcer guy for Lumen,
right, Drummond,
comes to Mark, remember, and he says, we need you to come back to work. Your innie is in love.
Right.
And if you give it enough time,
right,
you will feel some of the love your innie has now grown to feel.
Right.
Hinting at some sort of bleeding effect. I think we talked about this in our previous Severance chat. Like, is there a bleeding effect?
Right. I think that was Milchek, actually.
Oh, Milchek came. Yes, not Drummond.
Yeah.
Drummond's the guy who pop.
Oh, yeah.
My God, what a scene, though. That elevator and the gun going off.
Yes.
I was so shocked.
Yes.
I like gasped.
Yeah.
You're right. Milchek comes to him and says, your innie's in love.
Yes.
There will be a bleeding effect. You'll start to feel some of the love.
Totally.
Your depression will go away.
Right.
Here with Irving, we're kind of hinted at, like, is Irving feeling some of his innie's love?
Right.
Or is it placebo effect? Yeah. Is it just because he knows his innie fell in love with Bert that he thinks he outie can also fall in love with Bert?
Right.
And maybe they should give it a chance.
Right.
Or is there a deeper connection there? Or are those the same thing? Does it not matter? Yeah. Isn't love all about just giving it a chance anyway?
Yeah.
So does it matter that whether he did it because of his innie or not?
Yeah.
Maybe he will fall in love with it. I think there's a lot of fascinating questions. I think it also, the same idea of innie outie bleeding comes into play at the dinner party.
Yeah.
Because I was told I would go to hell because I'm gay.
Yeah.
but maybe my innie will go to heaven.
Yeah.
And that will save my soul? Yeah. Some part of my soul? Right. You know, how are we defining innies and heaven and hell? Like throwing the idea of religion into the mix here?
Totally.
Like that like sent me spiraling.
Yeah. I mean, the question of, you know, if we have a soul, if we have something more than just our kind of material, physical bodies and matter, then how does the severance process relate to that?
Yeah.
Does it split one's soul? It doesn't seem really possible. If there's a separation between spirit and matter, then I don't know how they could interact. But then what does it mean to say become reintegrated? And that's something that we should talk about with regards to Mark, the Marks, I should say, and some of the conversations they had around that. But yeah, there's a lot that's kind of raised about the like the unity of one's soul, identity, one's meaning, one's purpose, like all of those things when it comes to a procedure like this, where you can sort of shut things off or split or divide the two on a kind of a cognitive level in the way that they do in this show.
And again, the show continues to ask brilliant questions about the possibilities of that, right?
Yeah. Very uncomfortable questions.
Very uncomfortable. Yeah. Okay, well, this leads very nicely into our boy Dylan. Yeah, Speaking of uncomfortable questions about innies and outies.
Yeah, definitely.
So Dylan goes on his own journey throughout this season. It is a journey where I found this really beautiful.
Yeah.
It's a journey where he chooses a family.
Yeah.
It's either the outie family, his wife and kids, that he is told are his family, but he has no actual connection, like emotional connection to or memory of, or it is his work family, the people he sees day in and for his entire existence, his whole existence is in his office. And we see Dylan struggle with that in the start of the season. He rejects his office family in favor, and Lumen obviously uses this to manipulate him.
Yes.
He starts meeting with outie Dylan's wife. Privately, they start to build a connection.
Yes, they in fact share quite a powerful kiss.
A powerful kiss? Is that cheating?
Yeah, that's the question.
Who knows? And I legitimately teared up at the end.
Yeah.
With Dylan for two things. One, he chose his office family.
Yeah.
But the reason he chose his office family was because of the absolutely gut-wrenchingly beautiful letter that outie Dylan writes him?
Yes.
Perhaps the only character in the show that has shown any level of sympathy to the innies.
True. Yeah.
Is outie Dylan.
Yeah, and it's fascinating because that letter opens up with, first of all, fuck you. Which, fair.
On brand.
Yeah. But, over the course of the letter, as he continues to read, he does, eventually admit to, wanting to grow into the sort of person that his innie self is, and to live up to the person that his wife fell in love with and has fallen in love with again.
Right.
And it's quite touching. And you see, I think that's kind of the moment when Dylan begins to second guess this retirement thing, which he was sort of dead set on when his outie's wife basically refused to come back.
Yeah.
And there he is, a badass at the end of the day.
Oh, and
Innie Dylan is a badass, and he is kind of a legendary character. And it takes, I think, his outie self to really kind of underscore that fact for him. And I think I have to believe that it's also his love for his outie wife as well, that he wants to have hope for outie Dylan, in fact, growing into the sort of person that
I think you're right.
Fulfill her needs, essentially.
I think you're absolutely right. And consider the other outie innie interactions we've had in this show across both seasons.
Yes.
In season 1, we had Helena Egan basically telling Helly Egan to fuck off.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. I'm forcing you to be down here and you have no choice. You can't leave.
Yeah. You work for me.
You work for me.
Yeah.
Helena Egan calls the innies animals in this in season 2, in the current season.
Right.
And then, of course, in episode 10, we have like the truly iconic videotape scene between outie and innie Mark.
So good.
Where I would argue Outie Mark is an asshole.
Yeah.
Treats his innie not like a person.
Yeah, that I don't know if it occurred before that episode, but in that episode, there was definitely a big switch for me where I could no longer empathize with Mark or sympathize with Mark to the extent that we had been for now nearly 2 seasons.
Right. You're obviously cheering for the guy who's trying to get his dead wife back.
Yeah, obviously.
Until
yeah, he's kind of a duplicitous mofo.
Oh my goodness.
And they say it out loud. They say the quiet part out loud. They in fact say, yeah, I mean, of course we're not going to continue reintegration, essentially. Yeah. The conversation between him and his sister, where it's like, yeah, I mean, Andy Mark is right. We aren't going to be bringing him back, as soon as they succeed, then they move on. They've gotten what they want.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I mean, that's the power and the beauty of this show.
Yeah.
Is that the show has made us sympathetic to both Innie and Outie Mark's journey.
Yeah.
And so when they confront each other, we are also torn in two.
Totally.
We want Outie Mark to get the love of his life back and to get over this grief, to get the beautiful life we're shown in episode 7 with the flashbacks, to have all of that back.
Yeah, Jakai Bardo. Yeah.
What a truly astounding
beautiful
episode.
Yeah.
Like, my God. We want that for Outie Mark.
Yes.
But then over the course of this show, we spend so much time with Innie Mark.
Yeah.
We see Innie Mark fall in love. We see Innie Mark sort of self-actualize and find his independence, find his voice, find his rebel, his inner rebel.
Totally.
And then fall in love with
Ellie. Yeah.
And make love to
Ellie. Make love to Helena, in fact. Yeah.
So you gotta cheer for him too.
Yeah.
But that's kind of like the dirty, not even secret, the sort of like dirty question of this show.
Yeah.
How? It is two people in one body.
Yeah.
There is no technology that can download Innie Mark into some other body or give him a body.
Right.
And that raises the question of like bodily autonomy, which I think leads us into Helena.
Yes.
Helena and Helly.
Yeah.
Obviously, the first half of the season, the big reveal is that Helena was infiltrating the office.
Yes.
Irving calls that out.
Yeah.
And then Helly comes back, and we talked about this last time, but she raises this question of, this is my body. How could she do this to me?
Yeah.
Who owns this body? Yeah. Who has the autonomy here?
And she didn't give consent to Mark to sleep with her, but yeah, it's very complicated.
It's very complicated. Yeah. And I think similar questions are raised around Mark.
Yeah.
Who Innie Mark is like, okay, well, what the fuck? Once we integrate, aren't I mostly going to be you?
Exactly.
Because you've been you for like 35 years.
Yes.
I've been me for like 2 years.
Yeah. I thought that was such a brilliant question and such a impossible question to answer.
Right.
And we see Mark struggle to answer that,
As would anyone.
He basically fumbles the ball, and it's pretty obvious many times in that conversation. It becomes increasingly obvious that he is just trying
He's exploiting his innie.
He's exploiting his innie, and he's just trying to persuade his innie to do the quote unquote right thing for him.
For him.
Yeah.
Right? What does Innie get out of Gemma leaving forever and living a loving life with her husband?
Yeah.
Nothing.
He
has found his own love, as he says in that. What did you think of, let's circle back we'll come back to Mark. Obviously there's so much to talk about with Mark.
Yeah.
Let's stick with Helly for a second. What did you think of Helly's journey over the course of this season?
Yeah, Helly was fascinating. I think it's hard to talk about Helly without talking about Helena as well, because Helly is also wrestling with this. She's wrestling with the fact that Helena, the Outie that gave birth to her effectively, is a kind of despicable person.
Ugh.
And the fact that Helena was able to mislead Mark to the extent that he was unaware that it was Outie Helena and not in fact any Helly that he had been talking to for days, weeks, we don't know quite how long, raises a lot of questions. It makes you wonder, and it makes her wonder, am I all that different than the person on the outside? Am I just as much a, capital B bitch,
Yeah.
And I think just that, I mean, it happens again and again in this show, this question of identity and how you wrestle with it. But I thought it was, I mean, honestly beautiful to see Helly over time kind of assert herself more. And it was interesting to see that Kier Egan, excuse me, Jamie Egan. Jamie Egan, this guy.
Weirdo.
This guy. At some point kind of came upon Helly, Helly, and said she's got more the spirit of Kier than any of his other children. And there's a weird kind of setup there that I think might... I've read some interesting fan theories about what this means for season 3. Perhaps Jamie recruits her again, but this time in the other direction. He recruits Helly to be a sort of kind of a spy and to serve in the other direction. And perhaps, the bait there is offering her and Mark a chance to remain together.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. I think in many ways, she's clearly not outie Helena.
Yes, absolutely not.
But it's interesting that Jamie Egan was seeing kind of signs of his forefathers' ancestry in this inner character.
Yes. It raises the question, does she have the potential to become outie Helena?
Yeah.
Like what she fears, right? This despicable person.
Yeah. Will she make that turn? If that is something that's offered to her, does she take that, and of course the upside potentially might be to have things that she wants, and the people, the innies, they have wants, they have needs and desires. They're not innocent angels. They're as much as we feel for them, and they are obviously the exploited, much put upon humans that we obviously can relate to as those under the heel of capitalism.
That's right.
But at the end of the day, people are full, and the people have many sides to them, and it's not this kind. There are impurities, and and if she wants something, does she choose a lesser evil in her mind? A greater one, maybe from the point of view of Helena and outer Mark and outer Irving and others, but from her perspective on the inside, what's the heroic act here? You know?
Yeah, and I think you said something interesting. These innies aren't innocent blank canvases.
Yeah.
They're fully realized human beings with wants and desires and emotions and fears and love. And that raises to me this very interesting parallel of parenting and children.
Yeah.
Because you could look at it through the lens of the outies are the parents. They give birth. I think you even use that wording.
Yeah.
They give birth to the innies.
Right.
And the innies look up to their outies somewhat as gods, right?
Yes.
Like Gemma tells them, your outie is such a kind person.
Right.
Your outie drives an electric car, and it's not a Tesla.
Yeah.
So they kind of look up to their outies as these gods almost.
Totally.
Dylan's entire arc hinges on his outie recognizing him as a human being, as Innie as a human being.
Totally.
And Helena, much like many of us worries that she will end up like her mom.
Yeah.
Many of us also worry, oh my God, am I just my parents?
Right.
With all of their faults, the things that I, as a teenager, rebelled against.
Yeah.
Now that I'm there, grown up.
Yeah. Am I doomed to repeat their mistakes?
Am I just them? Am I just another copy of them?
Totally.
So I think there's a really interesting parents and children
Yes.
analog here that's worth considering.
Yeah.
Especially with Helena, who's will I end up like my mom?
Yes.
Will I become that despicable human being?
Right.
I think Dylan gets almost the ideal parenting version of it, where he's inspired by his dad, his outie,
Yeah.
and uses that as the motivation to be, the best version of his innie self.
Yeah.
It's interesting. And then, like, again, speaking of it from the Mark angle, Innie Mark genuinely looked up to Outie Mark to some extent. And even for the most of the season was dead set on getting Gemma out because it's the right thing to do.
Right.
Until he's like practically betrayed by his parent.
Yeah.
His parent like very openly begins to manipulate him.
Yeah.
And Innie Mark, who's been manipulated his whole life, is like, why is my dad doing this to me?
Yeah.
Aren't you supposed to be on my side?
Right.
So I think there's a very interesting, and you literally saying birthed.
Yeah.
And you saying like they're not innocent blank canvases.
Right.
I think, that there's a real world analogy there to be made between parents and children.
Yeah.
And the way some folks parent and the way some children think about their parents.
Yeah. No, totally. I mean, and there's, you captured it well with regards to Dylan. It is sometimes also the case that, parents learn from their kids. And sometimes cycles kind of repeat themselves, but then it's kind of like the snake eating its own tail. There's like, there's a lot of kind of interplay between both sides where it's not like a totally one-way relationship.
Yeah, it's fascinating to consider it from that lens for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on. We still have quite a long list to get through. Let's quickly touch on Milchick and Cobell.
Yeah.
Two very interesting employees of Lumen.
Yes.
Milchick now has Cobell's old job as manager of the severed floor.
Neither is themselves severed.
Neither of them are severed. I think that was a long-running theory about whether the manager also gets severed when they go down there, but it's clear now that they aren't.
Yep.
They are just themselves. Cobell rebelling against Lumen to some extent. In episode 8, we learn why.
Yes.
Obviously, she is quite bitter that her designs, her severance procedure that she developed have been stolen by the Egans.
Yeah.
And they took credit.
Yes.
They're profiting from it.
Yeah.
And they've kicked her to the curb.
Right.
And so Cobell is pissed.
Yeah.
I think we end the season, at least end the season, still not entirely trusting Cobell.
Yeah.
What are her motivations?
It's clear she is quite ingenious, quite intelligent, to have, obviously invented this procedure in youth. I mean, it's not totally clear, but as a young person, really quite impressive. It still seems like she has her own designs in this whole thing.
Yeah.
To what extent is she there to help Mark? To what extent is it, her seeking revenge for this kind of long-standing betrayal and kind of, IP theft, essentially? and to what extent is she seeking to kind of usurp power back at Lumen? Like, is she still seeking... It's hard to say what exactly her motives are. One theory that I have I can't get out of my head now is that, and I'll just point to a couple of things that kind of hint at this before revealing it here. But Cobell is she's constantly baking treats for Mark. At least her persona in the neighborhood.
That's right,
Miss Selvig. As his neighbor, constantly kind of dote on him. Later on, obviously in season 2, she seemingly tries to help him either kind of make it through this reintegration process or somehow get back the love of his life, Gemma.
Yeah.
And the fan theory anyways goes that she was and is, in fact, his mother. which is interesting. There would have to be a lot of I think there need to be some story plots, and holes filled for that to really totally make sense. Somehow it would have to come out that maybe, because we don't hear anything about Mark and his sister's parents basically throughout the show.
Right.
But it is indicated at some point that Parmeny may have had a child out of wedlock, perhaps with Jamie Egan as a young man, that she possibly had to give up for adoption. And
oh, wow.
the fan theory / conspiracy theory is that Harmony may in fact be Mark's mother.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, we have spent the whole show suspiciously never having learned a thing about Devin and Mark's parents.
Yeah.
It's
quite notable.
Devin had a baby.
Yeah.
So, why aren't grandma and grandpa there?
Right.
Are there a grandma and grandpa?
Yeah.
Were they orphans?
Right.
Interesting.
Yeah, I will say, the show, I believe, is, they're currently in the writer's room crafting season 3.
Yeah.
And the writers and the showrunner, Ben Stiller, everybody behind this show have done a great job of kind of teasing possible directions. There was obviously the clone theory that didn't pan out.
Right.
And I think they've been paying attention to some of the cultural commentary. Obviously, this show leaves you with a lot more questions at any given time than answers. And I think they kind of recognize that people are having a lot of conversation about the show kind of after the show. And I rather doubt they'll give us that one, but we'll see.
We'll see. Yeah. We'll absolutely see. Yeah. Okay. What do you think about Milchick this season? I had a wild theory in our last conversation that Milchick was going to turn.
Right.
That he was going to turn rebel, join the office crew against Lumen.
That's right.
That did not happen. I was wrong on that.
Yeah.
But I am going to defend that theory by saying I still don't think it's outside the realm of possibility. I think Milchick continues to be pushed and pushed and pushed by Lumen.
Yes.
And so I still see a possibility of him breaking from Lumen.
Yeah. I mean, and he does have small rebellions. There is the moment with Drummond where he basically is like, fuck you, I'm going to use the really long vocabulary that I have, the complex. And he's like, and there's nothing you can do about it, basically.
Yeah, I'm the floor manager.
I'm the floor manager, exactly. So I think there were some really satisfying moments of rebellion. Not quite, obviously, the full all-out rebellion against Lumen.
Right.
He, at the end, is still, when Mark and Helly escape from the... I don't know what they called it, but it was when the marching band comes in for their kind of celebratory,
band.
Which I think was one of the best scenes of the season.
By far, yeah.
Milchick, great moves, and from what I heard, basically just improv'd it, which was so fun. But of course, in that scene, he does eventually get locked in the bathroom, and they won't let him out, and he is desperately trying to get out and basically recapture Mark and Helly.
Yeah, which is in Lumen's interest. So
I
think he's pushing back and rebelling in certain ways, but I think the indoctrination runs deep.
Yes.
And I think it would have perhaps been unsatisfying to see him turn coat so quickly.
Right.
And perhaps we are only seeing the seeds of that here in season 2.
Yeah.
Maybe something that'll happen later. Maybe, again, indoctrination in a cult is a very weird thing. Maybe he doubles down eventually. You know, I still think it's purely 50-50 with Milchick.
Yeah, totally.
On which direction he lands. But I do think that's the character arc we're exploring with him.
Yeah.
Is somebody who was sold on the Lumen, I don't know, vision, dream, cult, whatever.
Yeah.
Can that sustain under pressure?
Yeah.
Or will it break?
Right.
How strong is the Lumen brainwashing?
Right. On that point, let us talk about what the kind of promise or premise of Lumen is.
Yeah.
What are they offering? What is the thing that they're trying to essentially perfect?
Yeah.
And it essentially comes out as it's a kind of quest to end pain and trauma.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's what they're experimenting with Gemma.
That's the entire Cold Harbor plot. It's essentially how many ways can we... I mean, with Gemma in particular, we see her go through 10, 15, 20 rooms, something along those lines, each of which she experiences varying degrees of trauma and pain, from the kind of artificial... dental procedures to the writing of the letters and
the fake plane crash.
Plane crash. That's right.
Yeah,
that's right. And and seemingly with the aim of essentially preventing any of that from bleeding out to Audi Gemma.
Yes.
To what extent can they eliminate human pain and suffering, however kind of ethically questionable it might be, as far as the actual
ethics has certainly never stopped
any corporation, I think. So
that's true.
And certainly not Lumen. So that is that's a really
So you think they're taking Cobell's severance procedure and testing it for future commodification.
Essentially,
so we sell this technology to other people. We license this technology out to like dentist offices, to planes, frankly, right? Like, I'm a nervous flyer.
Right.
I would love to just get on a plane and then be at my destination.
Exactly.
You know, that's the next best thing to teleportation, basically.
Yeah.
You commodify this technology, you sell it everywhere and anywhere. You know, there's a lot of discomfort in life, you know, as an adult, as a human being that has to exist in the world. You do things that range anywhere from like annoying to outright discomfort and pain and traumatic.
Yeah.
Some you do voluntarily, some happen to you, like a plane crash or something.
Right. And I mean, to your point, definitely evil in what it does to the innies. Like, it's not that suffering and pain is just going away. It's going into basically these like disregarded human entities. I mean, or you could just call them humans. You know, it's essentially it's humans that you never have to answer to, who don't really have the rights and responsibilities that the rest of us have. But you can
offloading suffering to, some might say, an underrepresented class that doesn't have the resources to defend itself.
Quite interesting.
And has been intentionally oppressed.
Yes.
And held back in order to
silenced and
silenced. And, you know, at this point, are we talking about innies or are we talking about, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I think there's a beautiful bit of commentary here about society, right?
Totally.
Like, the wealthier you are, frankly, the whiter you are, right? You get to offload much of your suffering to people who are not at the station that you're at.
Right.
And I think we see a beautiful bit of commentary there as well. You're absolutely right. This isn't like, we're not just forgetting the pain. We're not deleting the part of the brain that experienced the flight.
Right.
We are offloading the stressful, turbulence, bumpy flight to another human and letting that be their entire existence.
Right.
Because again, the horrifying thing about Gemma is, how do we even describe? Because she's split into so many innies.
Yes.
She's not just innie Gemma, Audi Gemma. She's Audi Gemma and like 15 different innies.
Yes.
But like dentist innie Gemma, her entire existence is she doesn't exist. She wakes up, undergoes oral surgery, and goes to sleep. Wakes up, undergoes endlessly.
Yeah.
If like that is hell, right? That is the description of
on
hell.
earth hell. Yeah.
So we put these other human beings, as you're saying, into an inescapable loop of hell.
Yeah.
So that we don't have to go through a minor inconvenience like going to a dentist for a checkup.
Right.
God, that's like so many levels of evil. It's horrifying.
Yeah. I mentioned this before we started the episode here. There's a story it reminds me of by Ursula K. Le Guin called For Those Who Walk Away from Omelas. And it's a fantastic short story. I would recommend the listeners here finding and reading it. I won't spoil it too much, but the basic premise is that you've got a seemingly utopian city, truly quite utopian city. The kids are happy playing in the streets. Food is plentiful. Everybody, there's 100% employment or 0% employment, whichever you think is better. But all to say, it's seemingly idyllic. And at the end, it's effectively revealed that the price of this utopia is the suffering of one person. So one person bears all the weight and pain and trauma and tragedy on behalf of the rest of the city's populace. And to gain entry and membership into this city, you are revealed this truth, and you can either accept it or leave. You can walk away. And that, I mean, to me, speaks so much to what we see in this show. I mean, it's basically, it's definitely evil what Lumen is doing. On the other hand, ending pain and suffering is one of the highest aims for many of us in this life. That's why we have doctors. That's why we have therapists and caretakers. We obviously don't want to promote or encourage pain and suffering.
Yeah.
It's to alleviate it, and that's what we do for one another even on an emotional level. It's what one of the many, 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 many benefits of friendship is that we get to share in one another's trials and tribulations and kind of shoulder that pain together.
Right.
So there's almost
one of the benefits of podcast co-hosting as
well.
That's
right. Exactly. But there is something almost noble in what Lumen is doing.
Wow.
And then you start
clip just that.
That's the one that goes viral. There's our social
clip for the week. There you go.
Lumen, noble.
OPSA loves Lumen.
The pro-Lumen candidate. Not what we were expecting. All to say though, I mean, there is.
I get it though.
It's really quite challenging, and it kind of makes you. It really does kind of bring to mind that question of how much of another suffering is
acceptable,
is enough. I mean, we have iPhones and Apple devices and all these other kind of devices that for many years relied on conflict minerals that
yep.
I mean, literal children would be
on cheap abusive labor
in the global South, and that's the price of our convenience in our digital age, and some of that
for the selfies.
It's for those selfies, and so certainly some of that has been kind of reduced, and there's a huge campaign kind of to basically upturn the supply chain and kind of lead to more ethical sourcing of these things. But that is something at almost all moments we are somewhat complicit in, that there is
absolutely
some amount of suffering of other people that we accept or ignore, kind of turn a blind eye to, in favor of the reduction of some of our own pain, suffering, discomfort.
Yeah.
And Lumen is really like the apotheosis of this. It's like it's doing it to the
taken to the gross capitalist extreme.
Like the extreme. Yeah, certainly.
Yeah. Gosh. Man, I need to check out that short story.
Yeah, it's great.
Even the 30-second premise you just explained now, I'm floored.
Right.
The real hook there is you're told what's happening before you're allowed to enter the utopian city.
Right.
And you can imagine how many people would just be like, yeah, fuck it.
Yeah.
Wow. Because we see that every day. And we're all guilty of a certain level of, fuck it.
Yeah.
If someone else has to take the burden of my pain. Right. So be it. That's just how life works.
Right.
That was your roll of the die was worse than mine, bud. Tough luck.
Right. Pull yourself up. Buy them bootstraps.
This, bootstraps that.
Yeah, exactly.
And that is certainly a human instinct, a dark human instinct we have to keep in check. Yeah. And Lumen has decided to do the opposite of keeping it in check, but to drill as deep as they can into that instinct.
Yeah.
My last question here on Lumen before we turn to Mark to wrap up. How big do you think Lumen is, though? Are we seeing a very insulated company town and lots of company employees and drama with each other?
Right.
Because the Burt reveal kind of makes me think, is everyone in this fucking town just employed by Lumen?
Right.
And there's also Dylan had this really funny scene earlier where he went to a door factory or something.
Yeah.
And he interviewed, and the guy was like, "Oh, you're severed? Never mind.
Right.
You need to go away."
Right.
So does Lumen have a PR problem? Is Severance still a problematic procedure in society? Is this a very insulated experiment that Lumen is doing in this very tiny corner of the universe?
Right.
And if so, how are they going to take that wide? You know, how do you sell everybody on this tech?
Yeah.
If there's already resistance to it. So I don't know that there's an answer, but I'm left curious, wondering how big Lumen actually is and how much influence they have on the society of the show.
Yeah, I mean, are they the world's first $10 trillion company? Yeah, I mean, you just have to imagine a company that can essentially sell you a pain-free existence in a pill, you know.
Yeah.
You have to believe would be compelling to, yes, shareholders, but also many consumers, you know, and it brings to mind some of the questions around AI, where it's like, massive upside here, you know, perhaps like a massive leap in our productivity as a species. But what about the costs? Like, are we basically turning a blind eye to the environmental costs and the loss of jobs is something that obviously is talked about a lot, but there is, these sorts of things do intersect with our, daily kind of experiences and the choices we make even today.
Yeah. I think you're onto something here with the parallels to today, because now I'm instantly thinking of something like Ozempic,
right?
Or what do they call it? GLP-1s? Just the brand of that kind of medicine, the like magic weight loss pills, quote unquote magic.
Right.
And how quickly those have been adopted. Like, honestly, I can't like fucking watch Hulu without a GLP-1 ad running every 2 seconds.
Right.
And Lumen to some extent is selling like pain Ozempic. Like we can just make your pain and trauma go away.
Right.
And if the sell is so tempting, people are willing to overlook a lot. And, you would think even like 10 years ago, if somebody was like, I'm developing a pill that'll make you skinny.
Right.
Every PR agency would tell you that's going to make you look fat phobic.
Right.
People are going to come at you for that. They're going to hate you for this.
Right.
You can't sell something that like effectively says fat people are the enemy
totally,
and demonizes them, and this magic pill will make you skinny and hot again.
Right.
How the fuck are you going to sell that?
Right.
And yet here we are.
Yeah. Time passes.
Like GLP-1s are common, and it's not just even a celebrity thing anymore.
No.
I don't have any direct friends or family who have experience, but I have friends of friends who certainly are like on them now.
Oh yeah. I certainly have
casual people,
at least family friends. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And that adoption and the conversations that has now opened up around fat phobia and body image, and like, if there is a magic pill, like, would we all take it? And have we all been pretending about not fat shaming people? And we'd all secretly in the deepest, darkest parts of our hearts want to be skinny and hot.
Right.
I think Lumen would present a same, like on a silver platter, would present a similar idea to everyone, where it's like, your therapist might tell you that your life experiences, good and bad, shape who you are.
Yes.
But what if they're all good?
What if they're all good? Yeah. No, totally.
And suddenly you're like, fuck what my therapist is saying.
Right.
I hate flying.
Yeah.
I'm just going to go on the Lumen plane, because then I don't have to remember ever flying.
Right.
So I think even if Lumen is small, their sales pitch is incredibly dark and speaks to a deep human desire to avoid pain.
Yes.
That's genetic.
Definitely.
Okay, shall we wrap up by chatting about Mark? We've been dancing around Mark this whole conversation.
Yeah.
Let's maybe land the ship there.
Yes.
Tell me how you're feeling. Obviously, Mark, our central character, a lot goes on with him, and in particular, Gemma.
Yep.
A big decision at the end in the final episode.
Yeah.
How are you feeling about it?
Yeah, so, at the end, obviously, any Mark chooses any Helly.
Whew.
And the reunion between Mark and Gemma is so short.
To say the least.
It seems so sweet for a moment, despite him being covered in blood as well.
Sure, but I'd kiss my lover covered in blood.
You would prefer it. This is where we reveal that you are in fact a vampire.
Right. This is not water in this bottle,
So yeah, I mean, it's something that, it was obviously so shocking to find out that Gemma was still alive, and we end season 1 with some hope that perhaps there's a path to their reconciliation and finding one another again. And it happens, and it takes all up until the very last scenes of season 2, only for Innie Mark
oh my God,
to turn the tables, and before he can be betrayed, he betrays outer Mark. And I think it's hard to have, I don't know, I have definitely seen people polarized by the season 2 finale. I found myself, I'm just kind of flummoxed. I don't know what to say or how to feel about it. And I loved that, I will say. I absolutely loved the angst that I felt with that decision and the open-endedness of it. And, where do they go from here? It's obviously super foolish what you've done, Mark. How much longer can you'll have 15 minutes until they find you. And you've just robbed outer Mark of a lifetime with his wife of many years.
Right. To end on just them running in the hallway too.
I
was so distraught,
Totally.
The credits hit and I was like,
what? Yeah.
This can't be happening.
Yeah.
Was my genuine reaction to because they just run off in the hallway as the alarms are blaring, as Milchick finally gets his way out of the bathroom.
Yes.
How long is that going to last before they lock down the severed floor and capture you guys? And I don't know. It ends on which is such a great way to end the show.
And I will say also cheering for him, It's like it's at the end of the day, he was going to be betrayed by Outie Mark.
Oh.
And
like that.
At the end of the day, what he chose is he saw Gemma on the other side of the glass and he realized,
that's not the woman I love.
I don't know this woman even. She's not the therapist I was just talking to. She's nobody to me. Yeah. And I think we would all want to choose in our final moments to spend as much time as we could with our loved one.
With the people we love. Absolutely.
And that rebellion is just tough. That's kind of the magic of the Marks, as a character and this finale. It's you're kind of left cheering for and angry at both.
Yes.
Both really full humans and people.
And here's the thing that breaks my heart about the finale.
Yeah.
Imagine a recut of this episode from Gemma's perspective.
Yeah.
You're trapped.
Yes.
Doing these fucking weird experiments.
Yes.
And then from Gemma's perspective, this episode is she goes into a room and then she suddenly wakes up.
Yeah.
Holding the bloody hand of her husband?
Yes.
What the fuck? And her husband says, "Come with me, I'm getting you out of here."
Yes.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
So of course she does, right? They get to the elevator, they kiss, they share a kiss.
Yeah.
That lasts all, of 60 seconds?
6 max.
Because then elevator transitions up into the Innie floor.
Yes.
She turns into Miss Casey.
And he turns
into Innie Mark mid-kiss. And they're like, what the fuck are we doing?
Why are we kissing?
That's kind of hot, but what are we doing? But then, Outie Mark gets Miss Casey out to the door.
Right.
So from Gemma's perspective, you see your bloody husband. You run away with him into an elevator. You kiss him for the first time in however many years, 2+ years.
Yeah.
And then you blank out again and you blank up and you're
on the other side
of a door begging your husband to come back as you're watching him run away.
Yes.
With Helena Egan, the company that's kept you, that abducted you and has kept you as a lab rat.
Yeah, that is such a mind just
And again, this is all happening like snap, 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 snap. Like her memory is just like, I'm Miss Casey, I'm me, I'm someone else, I'm me.
Yeah.
My
the continuity errors you're experiencing.
Right.
Why am I in a different room? Yeah, it's
and it's questionable. There's a lot of Gemma questions we have at the end here, right? Yeah. How much of Lumen does she understand? How much of Severance does she understand? Right. Presumably she understands the basics.
Yeah.
How much of obviously she doesn't know anything about Mark.
Yeah. Does she escape?
We don't actually ever see her banging on that door.
Yeah.
Is she going to escape? Yeah. Here's my thing. Here's a little bit of theory crafting for season 3. Yeah. I would love if season 3 was a Gemma season. She's our main character now. And now instead of husband saving wife, now we're with wife saving husband.
I like that.
As a season 3. Yeah. Maybe not for the whole season. I think it would be
good to start a mistake out with that. That'd be cool.
Make Mark disappear for a whole season or something.
Yeah.
He's such a central part of the show.
Yeah.
But I think I could very easily see the first 2 episodes of season 3 being entirely Gemma's story and Gemma's perspective on the outside.
Yeah.
Doing something, I guess. I mean, if she goes public, this blows up Lumen. I don't know how you kind of reset the status quo of the show where Lumen continues to do these experiments without some sort of government oversight.
Right. And
somehow nobody knows still.
Right.
I'm not sure how you would handle that. If she even escapes, maybe she just gets captured again right there at that door.
Right. Yeah, and ultimately, even if she does get out, I mean, to what extent will she be believed? Can she even tell this narrative of what happened? Is it just
I was abducted for 2 years?
Yeah, exactly. And it's hard to know, to what extent did she have a life as Audi Gemma when she was at Lumen? Yeah. She wasn't obviously always severed. There were times that we saw her in her room and she was herself. What does she think is happening? Is she clearly at some point tries to escape, which totally fails. Right. So there is some clear recognition that she's being held captive against her will.
Yeah.
But can she tell the story of how she arrived at Lumen?
Yeah.
What exactly they are doing? Because from her point of view, she is just being told to walk into various rooms and then she's back in the hallway. So from her point of view, she's basically either in her room or in the hallway to a series of rooms. And that's it.
That's her whole
existence. Has no idea what's happening on the other side of those doors. And I guess the only other place that she is basically existing is when she's being interrogated about the experiences she cannot remember.
She can't remember, right.
So it's
how does your tooth feel? It's I don't know, normal? Why would it feel any different?
Right. So it is, it is. I would love to see a Gemma arc.
Right. Because I have some questions about she chose to do this, right? She signed up for this.
Yeah.
So legally, can she even go public?
Right.
If she signed some sort of NDA and Lumen can just legally shut her up, or how does she even take Lumen down in the court of law if she technically volunteered for all of this and signed the paperwork?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how much she signed up for because
at
the end of the day, on the outside, the story is that she died, so Lumen is now harboring, Lumen is out harboring, I mean, they basically kind of kept up the ruse of this dead person, as far as, the appearances and the rest of the world is concerned.
Telling her husband that for sure.
Yeah. So.
Gosh. Yeah.
Yeah, it's curious.
Severance at its best, truly. That finale blew me. Everything from Milchick dropping some moves.
Yes.
To
Drummond?
To Drummond getting capped in the elevator.
Yeah,
honestly,
accidentally too, which was excellent. I mean,
amazing.
Yeah.
Throughout the show, we're constantly shown that moment of transition in the elevator where they all kind of
right.
Twitch.
And then camera pans and zoom.
But to use that twitch as a literal trigger, a trigger finger.
Yes.
Because I was watching the elevator scene and I was like, oh my god, he's going to transition, and then Audi Mark is going to have to wrestle Drummond. Right. This is going to be crazy.
Right.
What's going to happen? And then it just twitches. Oh my god. Absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
Amazing finale, amazing show.
Yeah.
We're getting a season 3.
Yes.
I could not look forward to it more. We're being promised that it won't take as many years to get season 3 because there was a huge gap between 1 and 2.
Yep.
Take that with a grain of salt as far as production promises go. Productions are always messy, but I, for one, am happy for Apple to continue losing $1 billion a year if they're going to be creating television and art like Severance, like Silo, like many of the other great shows on there.
Yeah.
What a great show. Lovely to have these conversations, of course, with you, Opsa, on these episodes. What a fun time. And again, we highly recommend it. If you somehow made it an hour into this conversation, listening to us spoil everything, and you're like, should I watch this show? Yes. Yeah. Of course, let us know your thoughts as well.
Yeah.
Check out the show notes for links to our Patreon and our Discord. That's where our community keeps these wonderful conversations going. Yep. Obviously, we just wrapped up reading Mickey 7 by Edward Ashton. Yeah. We talked about Mickey 17, the Bong Joon-ho film.
Yes.
And up next, we're sticking with Apple, honestly.
Apple's kind of gotten some hits in there.
They're doing it because up next, we're going to be reading Artificial Condition in preparation for the Murderbot TV show on Apple TV Plus,
which we're very excited about.
Which I'm very much looking forward to. So we will be covering both the book and the show on this podcast. We hope you'll be joining us for all of those very exciting things coming up. Yep. But as for today, thank you so much for hanging out, folks. This was a blast, Opsa.
Yeah.
And we'll see you all in the next episode.